President Trump unveiling the first part of his trillion-dollar infrastructure plan yesterday. He focused on air traffic control. Watch.
Our plan will get you where you need to go more quickly, more reliably, more affordably. And yes, for the first time in a long time, on time. We will launch this air travel revolution by modernizing the outdated system of air traffic control. It's about time.
The president is headed to Ohio tomorrow, where he will unveil another facet of that overhaul. Joining me right now is the CEO of U.S. Concrete, Bill Sandbrook. Bill, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Maria. Glad to be here.
So we want to ask you about what you're expecting. Your company is involved in projects across the country, including at New York's LaGuardia Airport. What's your expectation in terms of the change that we'll see in the coming, let's call it, 2 or 3 years?
Well, I do think there's going to be additional spend on infrastructure. And it's the first time that Congress and the administration for about the past 25 years have agreed on the needs and on the amount needed, $1 trillion. The American Society of Civil Engineers has graded our highways as a D, our airports as a D, our bridges as a C+. Out of the 600 and some thousand bridges in the country, over 40% are 50 years old or over. So we do have consensus on need and amount, and it still comes down to funding as usual.
Yeah, but what about, you know, the time it takes to get these things implemented? I mean, in terms of approvals and the red tape that you go through to actually get this done. Do you see any alleviating there?
Sure. One of President Trump's first executive orders was a streamlining order mandating streamlining permitting processes for these long lead time projects. I mean, to have a project that takes from concept inception until construction begins 10 to 15 years is just not tenable, and not tenable even on a budgeting mechanism.
Hey, Bill, do you have the workers that you need in order to do a big ramp up in infrastructure projects right now? You know, we have an unemployment rate down at 4.3%, and we talked to a lot of companies, particularly in the housing industry, who are saying there just aren't enough construction workers out there. What do you have?
Right. It's interesting. The labor participation rate is still at a historical low, so there's still a lot of people in the country that are not working. We do have to work harder, though, in the last 2 years to get ready-mix truck drivers, for instance. These guys have to have a commercial driver's license. They have to have some specialized skill set, and we do have some wage inflation there and are having to work harder at recruiting. So there is somewhat a bottleneck there, but basic economics and people that are sitting at home not working right now, I think, can fit that bill.
You say there's some wage inflation. Are you paying them more? What kind of raise are you giving your guys this year?
Well, I would say on average in most of our markets, we operate in Texas, California, and New York. It varies on the market and the labor tightness in each market, but I would say up to $1. So, you know, some of these raises are in excess of 5% a year now, when traditionally they've been closer to 3%.
Bill, you raised the question of funding this massive infrastructure project. What do you think is the best way to do it? Come on.
Well, I think it's going to take a couple different ways. The public-private partnerships are part of it, but obviously, you know, since 1992. I've been advocating, and industry has been advocating, increase the user fees or increase gas taxes. Since 1993, the federal highway gas tax has not been increased. It has not been indexed for inflation. Wages are higher, costs of materials are higher, but we haven't even kept up with inflation. So the single easiest source, I think, of funds would be some form of federal tax increase, maybe 10 cents on a gallon, indexed for inflation. So for the next 25 years, I don't have to go up and continue lobbying on this.
Hey, Bill, this may sound like an odd question, but given the aging infrastructure and the deficiencies, do you think $1 trillion is sufficient?
Well, ASCE again says we're $4 trillion underspent, but any increase is better than we have. The FAST Act that President Obama passed 2 years ago and was signed into Congress in December of 15 basically dedicated about $50 billion a year for the next couple of years towards infrastructure spending. Even a $200 billion federal funding bump leveraged up with private funds, that would be about a 40% increase on an annual basis if it was equally spread over the 10-year period. And that would be a start.
How long do you expect the projects to take once building gets done, whether it's LaGuardia or other bridges and roads? What's your vision in terms of how long these projects take and what kind of job creation we're looking at?
Well, the projects depend on the complexity, obviously, and there's going to be prioritization. The high priority projects will go first, and they're more complex. Some of those projects are multiple years. As far as the impact on job creation, $1 in transportation spending is an accelerator of $5 for other economic activity, so it would be a boost to the economy as well.
And then there's the border wall, Bill, one of the president's top campaign promises. The Department of Homeland Security has taken bids. What's your take on the wall?
Well, I think that's bogged down to some extent. I think the design process has been more complex than anticipated, and I think there's been a lot more aggressive approaches to defund the project, so I think that's bogged down to some extent.
What should the priorities be? We talk about roads, we talk about bridges, we talk about tunnels. They're not all in the same state of disrepair. In fact, we had a story a few weeks ago that bridges are actually improving. The number of bridges that are that are in bad conditions has dropped a lot in the last 20 years. Where should the priorities be?
Well, number one priority should be the traveling public safety. So any deficient bridges that pose a safety concern obviously need to be number one, and highways in similar disrepair should be number two. But then alleviating congestion, the free flow of goods and people throughout the country is a great economic boost. Nobody wants to be stuck in traffic. I don't care what major city you're in these days, you're going to get bogged down in traffic. So alleviation of congestion would be number three.
Let me ask you, Bill, before you go, how would you characterize the economy right now based on what you're seeing? We have this debate every day, really, about how strong things really are. What are you seeing right now, and what does your order book look like in the next 12 months?
No, that's an excellent question. Now, we operate on both coasts, California and New York, and the center of the country in Texas. All of our markets are extremely strong right now. When we reported our first quarter results, we have a backlog that's the largest in our history. And I see a very vibrant economy in our markets that we operate in.
Wow, terrific. Bill, good to have you on the program this morning. Thanks so much. Bill Sandbrook,
Thank you, Maria.
U.S. Concrete CEO.